Rocks. They're part of almost every video game landscape. Fantasy, space, Mushroom Kingdom, Hilltop Zone, Mega Man, Contra, all the way through Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Rocks are everywhere. But they weren't always as realistic as they are in, say, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. In fact, there was a time when rocks in video games were nothing more than piles of pixels, and sometimes reminded us of cookies or pies. And you know, sometimes cookies and pies reminded us of rocks. That's why today gameranx would like to take you on a journey through the evolution of rocks in video games. Rocks are a tradition in gaming. They have roots so deep in the DNA of games that it's difficult to track exactly when the first rocks appeared in games. But one of the earliest appearances was, believe it or not, Asteroids. 1979's game featured rocks floating around in space. Now, in Asteroids, you had to avoid the rocks at all costs, on account that was how you lost the game. And not only did you not want to lose the game, but nobody really likes getting hit by rocks when flying around in a spaceship. Luckily, you could also use your spaceship's weapon systems to destroy these spacebound rocks, but the mere fact your spaceship had weapons implied there was a looming threat. And that's exactly what happened when 1982's Raiders of the Lost Ark came to the Atari 2600. Technically, most of the game actually took place among rocks, and in this game, they were actually represented with various colors, which was pretty snazzy for the time. However, looking at video or screenshots of this game reveals that you never really had any idea what the hell was going on because it looked pretty bad. In fact, maybe even a little worse than Asteroids. Fast forward to 1985's Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System. Although not the first step since Asteroids, probably the most significant, in that the ground actually looked as though it was made up entirely of rocks. The rocks were only 3 colors, but managed to find a look that Indiana Jones previously had bungled entirely. And by that, I mean you could actually recognize what they were attempting to do on some level. The contrast and simplicity of Asteroids was obviously taken into account when making the art that eventually made up the landscape of Super Mario Bros. For the NES. Super Mario Bros. Essentially created the benchmark for rocks in gaming at that point, and all other rocks had to face pretty fierce comparison. If your video game's rocks didn't look at least as good as Super Mario Bros. Rocks, it was a sure thing your game would fail. That is, until Mega Man came out in 1987. Actually known as Rockman in Japan, the pixelated rocks in Mega Man were the most realistic yet. On top of that, there was a boss by the name of Gutsman who threw rocks, which was kind of a dick move, but they were very realistic for the time. So really, who cares if it was a dick move, because that's not the point of this video. The Mega Man series essentially progressed the rock, basically alone and unbothered, until the Sega Genesis came along and provided us Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, most people remember Sonic the Hedgehog as having 4 or 5 good games and then no other good games, but his creators were also innovators in the rock. Not only did they have very good-looking rocks with decorative checkerboard patterns as the ground, but also had destructible rocks that you could jump on, and that would be enough to destroy the entire thing. Sonic could also turn his body into a buzzsaw and drill through the environment, which caused small rocks to fall all over the place. And that was a big deal. The 16-bit era actually didn't do a whole lot to progress rocks after we saw the initial slew of them in Sonic and Super Mario World and Mega Man X and Super Star Wars. Super Star Wars was pretty good. Rocks are pretty good in that. But fast forward a couple years to the Sony PlayStation. 2 very important steps in the development of rocks in video games happened almost immediately. First, Crash Bandicoot, or maybe second, I don't know, I stopped keeping track. But second, or maybe first, was Tomb Raider. Everyone bought Tomb Raider because of the rocks, not for any other reason. Certainly not the way they marketed the main character of the game, but rather the detailed environments that contained almost exclusively rocks of some sort. Natural rocks, carved rocks, Actually, that's pretty much the extent of the rocks in the game, but they were both there, and they were both rocks. I mean, they were a lot more detailed rocks. Some of them were actually photos of rocks that were mapped onto polygons, which is pretty cool, but I mean, they were rocks. Meanwhile, over on the PC, where everything is better because the hardware is better, and that's obviously the only thing that matters, period, rocks were looking pretty good too. I mean, Duke Nukem was definitely a game that people bought specifically for the rocks, right? Because they were good. They were mapped onto polygons just like in Tomb Raider. Have you caught on to the idea that this is our April Fool's video yet? No? Well, I'll keep going. Eventually the Unreal Engine came out, and Unreal Tournament came out, and people were playing games in that, and they had rocks. They started to get pretty realistic too, because like they didn't look like total shit anymore. I mean, I keep saying that they looked great on each system, but they really don't. If you go back and look at it, they really look like shit. In fact, let's not even just say this, like the graphics prior to having realistic looking graphics didn't look realistic at all. I mean, that should be a pretty obvious statement, but it seems like we're at 6 minutes and you haven't caught on to this yet, so what are we doing? What are we doing? Seriously. And here's the thing, I'm asking you to answer that in the comments, because seriously, what are we doing? Like, here, okay, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time has some rocks in it. They could range from small rocks to big rocks, and they looked like rocks. Like, seriously, they actually looked like rocks. And then, as time went forward, things got more and more detailed. You saw rocks in games like Assassin's Creed, and obviously, as time went on, graphics got better. You know how every sector of technology works, where when you start something, you keep getting better at it the more you work at it. I mentioned the vanishing of Ethan Carter at the start of this. Have you ever seen the rocks in that game? Dropping the jokiness for now, that is insane. The graphics in that game are insane. It's seriously, they now have processes that use like texture maps to make rocks that look so much more realistic than they ever have looked. It's really actually very amazing. And when I say the processes in games like Fallout create some pretty amazing looking things, that's entirely genuine. But what's not entirely genuine is making a video about the evolution of rocks. Seriously, you are now nearing 8 minutes on a video about rocks, the evolution of rocks in video games. And like, it's a joke, but for the majority of this video, we actually did talk about rocks in video games, and that's great. That's probably the best part about it, is that you've stayed here for that long on a video that actually did talk about rocks in video games for a long time. So, April Fools. Did you enjoy this video? I mean, we are all having fun here, so if you did, please click the like button. Also, we would love to hear your opinion on rocks in video games, so hit up those comments. Let's have an actual discussion. Let's keep this train rolling and talk about this for real. If you're not subscribed to gameranx, now is a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and all of them are actually good. As always, we thank you so much for watching this video, especially this video, and we will see you again right here next time on gameranx.